Ilara had always felt the forest as a living thing. In winter, it whispered to her through the wind, the bare branches scratching the sky like brittle fingers. Her small cottage sat on the edge of the village, where the snow piled thick and quiet, leaving the world hushed except for the occasional cry of a bird or the distant howl of wolves. The villagers often warned her not to wander too far, not to feed the beasts that prowled the frozen woods, but Ilara never listened. Somehow she knew they were hungry, and somehow she understood their need as if it mirrored her own. Every winter she prepared small bundles of food, dried meat, bread hardened by frost, and bits of cheese she wrapped carefully in cloth. By the light of the moon, she would walk into the snow, leaving the packages along the winding path near the tree line. The wolves always came. Sometimes their eyes glowed like amber lanterns in the dark, watching her silently, and she would feel their gaze deep inside her chest, like a pulse that belonged to her as well. This winter was harsher than any in memory. The snow fell for days without stopping, and the wind cut through the village like a blade. Still, Ilara wrapped herself in her thick cloak and set out, her boots crunching in the icy white. She carried the last of her food, knowing she would need to return to the cottage soon to warm herself by the fire. As she reached the clearing where she usually left the bundles, a pair of glowing eyes appeared from the shadows. At first, she thought it was just a wolf, as usual, but the eyes lingered on her longer than the others, intelligent and unblinking, filled with something she could not name. Her heart thrummed. There was fear, certainly, but also a strange familiarity, a pull she could not resist. She knelt in the snow, spreading the food along the edge of the clearing. The wind swirled around her, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth. Then she felt movement, a ripple of shadow at the corner of her vision. Slowly, the massive wolf stepped into the moonlight. Its fur was black as the night sky, and its eyes glimmered gold. It stopped a few paces away, staring at her as if weighing her heart. Ilara did not move. She felt neither fear nor panic, only a quiet understanding, a connection she could not explain. The wolf crouched slightly, then, with a fluid grace, it moved forward to the food. The others appeared smaller and less imposing, their eyes bright but cautious. Ilara watched them eat, her chest rising and falling in relief. When the wolves finished, the largest one lingered. Its gaze held hers, and she felt a shiver run down her spine, as though the cold wind had touched something deeper inside her. For a moment, she swore she could hear a voice beneath the growl, a faint murmur she could not understand. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the wolf turned and vanished into the trees. Ilara stayed kneeling in the snow, watching until the last shadow disappeared. Her fingers were numb and the cold bit at her cheeks, but she could not bring herself to move. There was something about that wolf, something extraordinary, something that both frightened and fascinated her. Finally she rose, her legs trembling, and began the long walk back to her cottage. The next morning, the village seemed quieter than usual. Children trudged through the snow in muted boots, and smoke curled lazily from chimneys. Ilara went about her chores, but her mind kept wandering back to the golden eyes of the wolf. She tried to tell herself it was nothing, just an animal. But deep down, she knew it was more. When she returned to her cabin, she froze. The snow around her door had been disturbed overnight. Paw prints, huge, larger than any wolf she had seen, circled her cottage in strange patterns. She knelt, brushing the snow away with gloved hands, tracing the prints with disbelief. They were too large, too deliberate, as if someone had walked around her in silence, studying her. A chill ran through her, colder than the winter itself. Ilara stepped inside, shutting the door against the wind. She tried to convince herself she was imagining things, that the snow and shadows played tricks on her mind. But something inside her would not be silenced. She sensed she was being watched, protected in some strange, unseen way. Days passed, and the snow continued to fall. Ilara kept leaving food in the forest, always in the same clearing. The wolves came, but the large black one was not always there. Sometimes she thought she glimpsed it watching from a distance, its form shifting, almost human in movement. She would shake her head, telling herself that imagination could play cruel tricks, that loneliness could turn shadows into figures. Yet, there were signs she could not ignore. Tracks led from the forest to the edge of her garden, disappearing just short of her steps. Branches were broken along paths she never walked. Sometimes, she would hear the crunch of snow behind her when she was sure she was alone. And each night, she felt the eyes of someone, or something, watching from the darkness, glowing with a quiet, terrible intelligence. Ilara had never known fear like this. It was not the fear of wolves or of the dark, but a deeper, more urgent kind. It was the fear that the world was larger than she knew, that mysteries lingered just beyond the edge of her understanding. And with that fear came fascination, a pull toward the forest, toward the creatures that were not entirely beasts, toward the eyes that mirrored something within her own soul. One night, under a sky filled with silver stars and swirling snow, Ilara wrapped herself in her cloak and set out once more. She carried the bundles of food, placing them carefully along the familiar path. The snow was deep, the wind relentless, but she did not falter. She had become part of this ritual, part of something larger than herself, though she did not yet understand what. She reached the clearing, her heart hammering as she spread the food. And then she saw them, shadows moving in the corners of the moonlight. Wolves, yes, but larger than before, their movements eerily fluid. One stepped forward, black as the midnight sky, eyes gleaming gold. It approached her slowly, deliberately. Ilara did not flinch. She held out her hand, as if offering herself in trust. The wolf stopped a few paces away, sniffed the air, then lowered its head and ate. Other wolves circled, some huddled in the snow, but her eyes never left the golden gaze. She felt a shiver pass through her, a pull, a connection, a promise she could not yet name. When the last wolf disappeared into the forest, Ilara stood alone in the snow. The cold was biting, her fingers raw, but her heart was strangely warm. She had glimpsed something extraordinary tonight, something beyond the ordinary world. And though she did not yet know it, she had begun a journey that would change her life forever. She turned back toward her cottage, her steps slow and deliberate. Something was following her, watching, always watching. She did not see it clearly in the dark, but she could feel its presence. A silent guardian, patient and powerful, waiting for the day she would understand. As she reached her door, a final gust of wind blew the snow aside. Ilara paused, listening. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then a low, almost human growl echoed through the trees. She shivered, gripping the doorframe, her heart racing. The eyes of the wolf, the eyes of her mysterious neighbor, had seen her, and now they waited. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, but the memory lingered. The memory of eyes that were not quite wolf, not quite human, watching her with patience and longing. She did not yet know who or what they were, but she knew, deep in her heart, that her winter ritual was only the beginning. The snow fell outside, soft and relentless, covering the tracks of creatures and humans alike. But inside, in the warmth of her cottage, Ilara felt the stirring of destiny, a quiet pull toward a mystery she could not yet name. And somewhere beyond the trees, the wolf waited, golden eyes glowing like lanterns in the night, watching the woman who fed them, unaware of the bond that already tied their fates together. The snow had softened slightly when Ilara awoke the next morning, though the forest still lay heavy with winter's hush. She moved about her small cottage, lighting the hearth and listening to the creaking of the old roof, but her mind lingered on the golden eyes she had seen in the clearing. The memory was vivid, too vivid for her to dismiss as imagination. Something about that wolf had seemed almost human. She tried to push the thought away, returning to her daily tasks, repairing her roof, tending to the small indoor garden she kept by the window, and preparing food for the coming winter nights. But her routine was broken by the arrival of strangers in the village. A family had come to occupy the old manor at the forest's edge. The villagers whispered rumors. They said the family was strange, that they rarely appeared in daylight, and that the forest seemed more alive when they arrived. Alara watched from her window as a carriage trundled through the snow. A tall man stepped down, dark hair falling in waves around his face. His eyes were sharp, amber bright, and they seemed to scan the forest as if he could see its every shadow. She shivered. Something about him was familiar, though she had never met him. Her pulse quickened in a way she could not explain. That evening, compelled by a restless curiosity, Alara bundled herself in her cloak and carried food to the clearing as she always did. The snow crunched beneath her boots, the wind tugging at her cloak. When she reached the clearing, she saw movement in the trees. Wolves. As usual, they emerged, circling the food. But tonight, there was only one, the black wolf with the golden eyes. It stepped forward, elegant and powerful, and Alara's breath caught in her throat. The wolf stared at her, tilting its head as if listening. Then with a fluid, almost unnatural motion, it shifted. Before her eyes, the massive black wolf changed shape. Muscles tightened, fur melted into skin, and bone shifted until standing before her was a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that framed a face both fierce and strangely tender. His amber eyes were the same golden glow she had seen in the wolf, and they held her gaze with intensity that made her heart flutter and her knees feel weak. I didn't mean to startle you," the man said softly, his voice low, rich, carrying a strange resonance that seemed to echo in the clearing. He paused, studying her as if she were a puzzle to solve. "I am Kyle," he added finally. Alara's voice caught in her throat. "Kale," she repeated, unsure if speaking aloud would break some spell. Kale nodded once, a shadow of a smile on his lips. "Yes, I have been watching. You come here every winter feeding those who cannot feed themselves. It is unusual, brave, perhaps foolish." Alara swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. I know they are hungry. I cannot help it," she said. Her voice was small against the vast, snow-covered clearing. Kale's gaze softened slightly. "Compassion is a rare gift. Few would risk the forest like you do, especially in winter." He stepped closer, the snow muffling his boots. Yet she noticed how careful he was, almost gentle, as if respecting some invisible boundary between them. For a long moment, they simply regarded one another. Then, as if remembering his form, Kale shifted back into the black wolf. He crouched beside the food, eating with controlled grace, then lifted his head and stared at her. Alara felt a pang of awe and fear. The wolf before her was not merely an animal. It was sentient, intelligent, and somehow tied to her in a way she could not yet understand. The night passed in quiet observation. Alara returned to her cottage as dawn began to lighten the snow, her mind filled with thoughts of Kyle. She felt both drawn to him and wary, unsure what his presence meant. Who was he, truly? Why had he shifted into human form, and why had he chosen to reveal himself to her now? Over the following days, Kale began to appear in other ways. Sometimes she would catch a glimpse of him on the outskirts of the forest, watching silently from behind snow-laden trees. Other times, he would leave gifts, a branch carved with strange markings, a bundle of herbs she did not recognize, or small tokens that felt almost like messages. She realized he was trying to communicate, though the words never left his lips. One afternoon, as she walked along the path carrying firewood, she saw him fully human again. He stepped out from behind a tree, and her heart skipped. "You should not wander alone," Cale said softly. His voice was calm, controlled, but it carried an unspoken warning. I am careful," Elara said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. "I know how to survive in the forest." Cale's eyes softened, but a shadow passed across his features. "You do not know what lives here," he said. "Not all of us are kind. Some are bound by instincts. Darker ones. You are brave, but bravery can be dangerous." Elara looked at him, seeing not a predator, not a threat, but something trapped, struggling. There was a sadness in his amber eyes, a weight she could not name. "And you?" she asked quietly. "Are you dangerous?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, his gaze intense, as if testing her courage. "Perhaps, perhaps not. That depends on the choices we make." Days turned to nights, and their encounters became more frequent. Cale never spoke of his curse directly, yet his presence hinted at a dual nature: wolf and man, beast and human, strength and longing. Elara felt herself drawn to him, captivated not just by his power, but by the vulnerability he tried to hide. One evening, during a snowstorm heavier than any in memory, Elara wrapped herself in her thickest cloak and ventured into the forest. She carried food as always, but the wind tore at her, and snowflakes stung her face. When she reached the clearing, she found Cale, not in human form, but as the black wolf, limping, blood matted in his fur. Her breath caught. "Cale!" she cried, dropping to her knees. She knelt beside him, trying to calm her rising panic. "What happened?" Cale lifted his head slowly, eyes meeting hers, golden and haunting in the storm's dim light. He made no sound, but the pain in his stance was clear. Elara carefully examined him, finding deep cuts on his legs, the marks of some hunter's trap. She pressed her hands gently against the wounds, murmuring words she hoped would soothe him. "I will help you," she whispered. "You don't have to face this alone." The wolf shifted, and for a moment, his form wavered. Amber eyes met hers, full of something unspoken: gratitude, fear, longing. Then, slowly, Cale transformed into his human form again. He shivered, snow clinging to his dark hair, eyes bright and full of pain. "Elara," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the storm. "You should not have come here." "I could not leave you," she said firmly. "I would not like this." He studied her for a long moment, then reached out, his fingers brushing the snow from her cloak. "You do not understand what you are touching," he said, voice low, heavy with emotion. "There are forces in this forest older than the village, older than you or I. Some of us are bound by them, cursed by them. Your kindness has made a difference, but it has also put you in danger." Elara's heart pounded. "I am not afraid," she said. "I will not abandon you." Kyle's gaze softened, but his lips pressed into a thin line. "You do not know what fear is yet," he whispered. His voice trembled, almost unintentional, and Elara realized he was as vulnerable as he appeared strong. The duality of him, wolf and man, danger and tenderness, filled her chest with a strange, aching longing. The storm raged on, snow and wind lashing the clearing. Elara tended to Cale as best she could, binding his wounds with cloth and herbs she had learned to use over the years. The forest around them was silent except for the howl of distant wolves, as if the pack itself was waiting, watching, aware of the fragile trust growing in the snow. When the night finally softened into early morning, Kyle looked at her, eyes luminous with emotion. I have not known kindness like yours in centuries, he said softly. You have changed something inside me, something I thought was lost. Ilara's hands rested on his arm, warm against the cold. Then let me stay, she said. We can face it together. Cale's amber gaze lingered on her, a mixture of gratitude, longing, and uncertainty. Perhaps, he said finally, perhaps, but there are things you cannot yet see. There are forces at work that will test us both. And yet, I find I am drawn to you, despite everything. Ilara's heart trembled at his words. She knew in that moment that her life had changed irrevocably. She had crossed a threshold into a world of danger, mystery, and unexpected connection. And though she did not yet fully understand Cale, or the truth of the wolves she fed each winter, she knew she could not turn back. As the sun rose behind the snow-covered trees, painting the forest in pale gold, Ilara and Kyle remained in the clearing. The storm had passed, but the air still thrummed with magic, possibility, and the unspoken bond forming between them. Beyond the trees, the faint silhouettes of the wolf pack lingered, watching silently, waiting. And in that quiet, golden moment, Ilara realized that the forest and the mysterious creature who had revealed himself was no longer simply a place of survival. It was a place of connection, of longing, of a story only beginning to unfold. But even as hope stirred, a shadow lingered in Cale's eyes, a hint of danger yet to come. Something ancient and powerful was watching, waiting for the night when the line between human and beast would be tested again. And in that moment, Ilara understood that her act of kindness, feeding the starving wolves, had set events in motion that would change everything. The golden eyes of the black wolf lingered in her memory as she walked back to her cottage, the first light of morning reflecting on the snow. Something told her this was only the beginning, and that the neighbor she had yet to truly know, the one who was both man and wolf, was bound to her fate in ways she could not yet imagine. Winter had settled deep into the forest, and the village lay wrapped in a quiet, frozen slumber. Snow drifted between the trees like silver mist, covering every branch and stone. Ilara could feel it in her bones. The forest held secrets, secrets that were growing bolder with each passing night. Since that evening of the storm, her bond with Cale had strengthened. He came to her cottage, sometimes in human form, sometimes as the black wolf, and always with a silent purpose. Their conversations, when they came, were cautious and deliberate. Cale revealed little of himself, yet she sensed his inner struggle, a constant tension between his human heart and the wolf within. Ilara noticed the pack more often now, their presence lingering at the edge of the trees. They did not approach her as before. Instead, they watched, alert and wary, as if testing her. Some nights she could hear them moving closer, their paws silent over the snow, their amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. It was both thrilling and terrifying. One evening, Kyle led her deeper into the forest than she had ever ventured. The wind was colder here, the snow heavier, and the shadows darker. They walked in silence until they reached a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. At the center lay an ancient stone circle etched with symbols worn by centuries of frost and wind. "This is where my pack," Kyle began, his voice low, "has kept the old ways, the rituals that bind us to this forest, the curse that defines our existence." Ilara's eyes widened. "A curse?" she asked. "What do you mean?" Cale shifted uneasily, running a hand through his dark hair. "Centuries ago, my ancestors were cursed by an ancient spirit of the forest. We became wolves bound to winter, creatures who must survive or perish by the forest's will. Some nights the wolf is stronger than the man. Some nights the man fights to remain. Elara shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of his words. And the humans who hunt you? She asked softly. Do they not know what you are? They know only part, Kale admitted. They see the wolves as beasts. They do not understand the curse, nor the bond we share with the forest. They would destroy us if they could. His amber eyes met hers, sharp and vulnerable all at once. That is why your kindness matters, Elara. You feed us, and in doing so you give us a chance to survive. You may not know it, but you have been saving more than the wolves' bodies. You have been preserving their humanity. Elara's heart pounded. I never meant to do anything extraordinary, she whispered. I couldn't leave them starving. Kyle's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. Extraordinary, yes. Brave, yes, but also dangerous. By helping, you have drawn yourself into the shadows with us. You are no longer merely an observer. You are part of this story now. A low growl broke the silence, and Elara turned to see the other wolves watching from the edge of the clearing. Their eyes glimmered in the moonlight, both wild and knowing. Kyle stepped between her and the pack, a silent guardian. They will not harm you, he said, but they are cautious. They judge all who enter our world. Elara nodded, understanding that she had crossed into a place where the ordinary laws of life no longer applied. I do not fear them, she said. Nor do I fear you, Kyle. I want to help. Tell me how. Kale's amber gaze lingered on her. Helping is not simple. There are rules old as the forest itself. There is a way to break the curse, but it is not mine to grant alone. It requires a bond between human and wolf, a trust, a courage, and a heart pure enough to withstand the pull of the forest. Elara felt a strange thrill. And do you think I could do this? Kale's expression softened, yet the shadow in his eyes remained. I do not know. You are strong, kind, and unafraid, but this path is not easy. Many have failed before. The forest tests all who seek to change fate. The wind rose suddenly, howling through the pines. Snow swirled around them, and Kale's form shimmered as he shifted into the black wolf. He circled her slowly, eyes still locked on hers. She felt the weight of his presence, the raw strength that both threatened and protected her. Elara, he murmured, his voice carrying across the snow. There is something you must see, something you must understand before the moon rises fully. Come. He led her to the edge of the forest, where the tracks of hunters crisscrossed the snow. The prints were fresh, deep, and jagged. Elara gasped. They are close, she whispered. They want to harm you? Kyle's jaw tightened. They will try, and if they succeed, the curse strengthens. If they fail, perhaps there is hope. His gaze softened, and he shifted back into human form, tall and commanding. Elara, you must promise me something. When danger comes, you will not run. You will stay and you will face it, for your courage may be the only thing that saves us all. Elara's chest tightened. She had never imagined facing hunters, magic, or curses. Yet, looking into Kale's golden eyes, she felt a resolve rising within her. I promise, she said firmly. I will not leave you. The next full moon approached, bringing with it a strange, restless energy. The forest seemed alive, whispering secrets she could almost understand. Wolves prowled closer to the village, their amber eyes gleaming in the moonlight, their movements deliberate and alert. Elara could feel the tension in the air, the pull of something ancient and powerful. On the night of the full moon, Kale appeared at her door. He was fully human, but the wolf lingered in the intensity of his gaze. Tonight, he said quietly, the hunters will come. You must be ready. Elara's heart raced. She had known the danger was real, but hearing it confirmed made the fear tangible. Yet she did not waver. She had chosen this path. She would stand beside Kale, no matter the cost. They moved silently through the snow, Kale leading, Ilara following. The wind carried the scent of the hunters before they saw them. There was a sudden flurry of movement, and the forest erupted with tension. Shadows darted between the trees, and Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears. Kale shifted into wolf form, sleek and powerful, moving with speed and grace. Ilara stayed close, her hands brushing the snow-laden branches, her mind racing. She could hear the wolves around them circling, guiding, protecting, a chorus of silent guardians. Suddenly, a hunter appeared from the shadows, rifle raised. Ilara froze, but Kale leapt forward, powerful and precise. The hunter stumbled back, eyes wide with disbelief, as the black wolf vanished into the snow, reappearing as human beside Ilara. "Move!" Kale commanded, and they ran, the hunters shouting behind them. The forest seemed to guide their path, branches bending, snow hiding their footprints, as if the land itself were aiding them. They reached the ancient stone circle, panting, snow clinging to their clothes and hair. Kale turned to her, eyes blazing amber. "This is the heart of the forest," he said. "Here, the curse can be challenged. Here, the wolves are strongest, and so are we." Ilara looked around, seeing the pack emerge from the shadows, their eyes shining, their forms both terrifying and beautiful. She realized then that the wolves were not merely beasts, they were guardians, protectors, a living bridge between human and spirit, curse and redemption. Kale's hand found hers. "Tonight," he said softly, "you may see what no human has seen. You may witness the truth of the forest and the bond that could save us all, but know this: the path is perilous. Once you enter it, there is no turning back." Ilara nodded, heart pounding, snow dripping from her cloak. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady despite the fear swirling within her. "I will not run. I will stand with you." Kale smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and worry in his amber eyes. He shifted back into wolf form, and together they moved into the circle, joined by the pack. The snow swirled around them, the wind howled, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. Ilara felt the pull of something ancient, something powerful, as if the very trees were alive, watching, waiting. The full moon rose high, silver and luminous, casting light on the frozen landscape. And in that light, she understood for the first time the depth of what she had entered. A world of shadows and secrets, of wolves and humans, of curses, and the possibility of redemption. Her hand brushed Kyle's fur, and she felt his warmth, his strength, and the longing that mirrored her own. The hunters were still out there, but here, in the heart of the forest, she felt a strange, fierce hope. The night stretched on, snow drifting in silver sheets, the forest alive with whispers and movement. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the forest waited, patient and ancient, for the bond between human and wolf to be tested, and for Ilara to discover the power within her own heart. The full moon hung high above the forest, silver and luminous, casting long shadows across the snow. The night was silent except for the occasional whisper of wind through the pines. Ilara stood at the edge of the ancient stone circle, her cloak wrapped tightly around her, her breath rising in misty clouds. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting, as if the trees themselves knew that tonight would decide everything. Kale stood beside her, tall and unwavering in human form. His amber eyes shone in the moonlight, both fierce and tender. The black wolf lingered at the circle's edge, circling slowly, and other members of the pack appeared, their eyes glowing with silent power. The hunters who had followed them lay hidden among the trees, unaware of the magic that protected the clearing. "Ilara," Kale said softly, his voice a low rumble that blended with the wind. The curse reaches its peak tonight. The full moon strengthens the forest and the wolves. You must understand. What you do here matters not only to me, but to all who are bound to this land. Elara met his gaze, her heart steady despite the fear that lingered in the back of her mind. I understand, she whispered. I will not run. I will face it with you. Kale reached for her hand. His touch was warm, grounding her in the swirling snow. Then we begin, he said, shifting into the black wolf once more. The pack followed, their forms moving fluidly in the moonlight. Elara watched in awe as the wolves formed a circle around the stone formation, their golden eyes fixed on her. There was a rhythm to their movement, a silent communication that spoke of centuries-old knowledge and power. Kale stepped forward, black fur glistening with frost, his eyes locked on hers. You have already given us life through your kindness, he said, his voice now carried in her mind as clearly as if spoken aloud. Now, you may give us hope. You must choose to trust fully without fear. Elara nodded, heart pounding. She stepped into the circle, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. She could sense the forest around them, alive and watching, the snow beneath her feet vibrating with energy. She placed her hands on the cold stone in the center, and a shiver ran through her as if the forest itself recognized her presence. The wolves began to move, circling faster, their growls low and steady, a chant of power that resonated in the air. Kyle approached her, slowing the movement with a soft nudge of his head. His amber eyes held hers, unwavering, pleading. Trust me, he said simply. I do, Elara whispered, closing her eyes. She felt the energy of the forest flow into her, cold at first, then warm, filling her with strength and clarity. The pack's movements slowed, then stopped, as if waiting for her signal. Kyle shifted back into human form, kneeling before her, his hands reaching out. Your heart, your courage, it can bind the curse, he said. The wolves and the men within them can be freed if you allow it. But you must do it willingly, not out of fear, not out of obligation, but out of choice. Elara's hands trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of the moment. She looked into Kyle's eyes and saw the duality within him, the wolf and the man, the power and the vulnerability, the longing and the fear. She understood that her decision would not only save him, but every soul bound by the ancient curse. I choose this, she said clearly. I trust you. I trust the forest. I trust the wolves. The moment she spoke, the snow around them shimmered with silver light. The air seemed to hum with energy, vibrating through every tree, every branch, every stone. The wolves howled in unison. A sound that was both mournful and joyful, rising into the sky like a song older than time itself. Kale stepped forward, placing his hand over hers on the stone. His amber eyes glowed brighter, reflecting the moonlight as the energy of the forest surged through them. The black fur on his shoulders shimmered and faded, transforming back into human skin. The other wolves, one by one, shifted back into their human forms, their eyes wide with awe and relief. They were free, no longer bound entirely to the forest, no longer prisoners of the curse that had controlled their lives for centuries. Elara gasped, her hands still touching the stone. The power of the forest ebbed and flowed around her, leaving warmth and a sense of completion. Kale stood before her, fully human, and reached for her hand again. You have done this, he said softly. You have freed us. You have given us hope and life. Tears welled in Elara's eyes, and she smiled. I only followed my heart, she whispered. I did what I could. Kale smiled faintly, amber eyes glistening with emotion. Your heart is stronger than any magic, stronger than any curse. It has saved us all. The wolves, now fully human, gathered around, bowing their heads in respect, gratitude, and something akin to reverence. It was a moment of unity, of renewal, of ancient bonds finally healed. Ilara realized that the forest itself seemed to exhale, the weight of centuries lifting, the snow glowing softly in the moonlight as if the world itself were celebrating. Kale led her to a small rise overlooking the clearing. "The curse is broken," he said, voice soft, almost trembling. "But the forest, it will always be part of us. The wolves, the trees, the magic, it remains, and it watches over us." Ilara leaned against him, feeling the warmth of his body, the strength and kindness within him. "Then we will face it together," she said. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Kale kissed her forehead, a tender gesture that carried all the weight of gratitude, longing, and love. "Together," he repeated. The snow began to fall lightly again, dusting the forest in silver. The village beyond slept peacefully, unaware of the transformation that had taken place in the forest's heart. The wolves who had once prowled the winter nights were now humans, free to live, free to choose, guided by the courage and compassion of a woman who had dared to trust them. Ilara looked up at Kale, her amber-eyed companion, and knew that life would never be ordinary again. The forest had changed them, shaped them, bound them together in ways neither could fully understand yet. But there was hope now, and there was love, and there was the quiet, enduring magic of winter itself. As they walked back toward her cottage, the other former wolves trailing behind, Kyle paused at the edge of the forest. His amber eyes glimmered in the moonlight. "This is only the beginning," he said. "The forest will always have its trials, but now we have a chance to live, truly live." Ilara smiled, brushing snow from his shoulders. "Then we will face whatever comes," she said, "as long as we are together." They stepped out of the forest, the snow crunching softly under their feet. The village awaited, and the world seemed lighter somehow, as though the air itself had shifted. The hunters, no longer a threat in this renewed balance, had vanished, leaving only silence and the whisper of the wind. Kale turned to Ilara, his expression gentle, the fierce amber softened into warmth. "You saved us," he said. "You saved me." Ilara's hands held his. "We saved each other," she said softly. "And now, we are free." A soft howl echoed from the far edge of the forest, faint, almost mournful, almost celebratory. Ilara looked toward the trees, seeing shadows move among the trunks. The wolves had not entirely vanished. They remained, guardians and watchers, spirits of the forest, a reminder that magic lingered and that the bond between human and wolf, heart and courage, would never be broken. Kyle's hand tightened around hers. "Let us go home," he said, smiling. "We have winters yet to share, and a life to build together." Ilara felt warmth bloom in her chest, stronger than the cold, brighter than the moonlight, and she knew it was more than love. It was hope, it was courage, it was the bond that had carried them through darkness into light. Together they walked through the snow, leaving the stone circle and the ancient forest behind, yet carrying its magic within them forever. The winter night remained, silver and still, but within it, two hearts beat in rhythm, human and wolf united, free and unafraid. And in that quiet, timeless moment, the forest whispered its blessing, the moon smiled upon them, and the story of Ilara and Kyle came to its luminous, redemptive close.